Hi. Um, as you might have seen it, John Crowther is coming to Hungary in October. In Budapest, we will have a conference, um, and I'm gonna put the details in the description below. And I would like to invite all of you who are watching me. I know there is a very low chance of someone watching me in English and living somewhere around Hungary and wanting to come to this conference. But if there are only like 2 or 3 of you, it's absolutely worth making this video. If there's just only one person who just feels like coming, it's worth for me to make this video. So I've already done this video in Hungarian, and I hope that 100-200 Hungarians would show up at this conference, and you're also very welcome. So I would like to share with you my testimony related to John Crowther, who is gonna be the main speaker at this conference. In 2016, I met God and I had a radical encounter, and I've gone crazy very soon. So in April, I had an encounter, and in June, I was already in full-time ministry. I don't advise this to anyone. It's not healthy, especially if you struggle with mental health issues. This is not something you should do. But this has happened to me, and God just made me survive it. So it was a harsh thing for me. Things were happening so fast. I was part of a large youth movement. We've seen thousands of people gathering every week, and hundreds of people turning to God. A lot of miracles. It was a great movement at the time, and I was a part of it, and I loved it, and I was part of everything that you can imagine. You could never have a meeting without me. I was definitely on the prayer team no matter what was going on, and I'm not regretting it because I've seen so many things, so many miracles. I've seen way much more of the kingdom in a week than in my previous 20 years before that. So it was, yeah, awesome. But most people manage to get burned out after decades. I reached that point after a year. So I entered ministry in 2016. In 2017, I was completely burned out, and by that time I knew some supernatural stuff, gifts of the Spirit. I also kind of understood the value of the presence of God. This was my main thing, to spend time with God. But I was so burned out, I felt like I couldn't even connect with God. I know that this is the solution to come back to the source, but I'm especially not able to do that. I'm still able to minister, and God still shows up somehow. People still get healed, but I still feel like I'm dead inside. And it felt terrible. And I was trying to get back to the source, get back to God and enjoy Him again, but I couldn't. And I felt like the only solution is not working. What to do? All the doors are getting closed around me. After being healed from depression, after seeing that many miracles, after encountering that many things from God, I've already had a couple of videos at that time. I still feel terrible. There is no help for me. If after all of these things, I still feel like that. I've seen so much more than most of my people in my age, and I still feel crap. Like, there is no hope for me. That's what I felt like. And I was in my room. I started to get so depressed, a little bit more depressed than the way I was depressed when I was depressed in my teenage years. Like I started to feel like my body is shutting down. Like I'm not really able to get out of bed. Everything hurts. Everything is tiresome. So yeah, I was hitting a low point. Like, and yeah, it was like so controversial because when I went out to those meetings with a couple of thousands of people, I was just one of the volunteers, but I ministered there a lot, and things were still happening, and I felt terrible. Anyway, this was the time when I heard from a pastor, Dan Hirsch. I'm so thankful for you. That they are organizing this Supernatural Grace Conference, and grace was the word that meant nothing for me at that time. Like, grace is like fill-in word, like a curse word. You add it to every sentence. In Hungary, people are like cussing all the time, and they add those words after every sentence. I don't know whether you do it in English, but in Hungary, people do that. And grace was like that, curse word in Christianese. Like, you add it to fill in the gap and sound cool. And like, this is what I'm the least interested in, Grace Conference. It literally means nothing to me, but yeah, never mind. But I was feeling so bad at home. I was scrolling Facebook, and I've seen some of my friends being interested in that Facebook event, and I'm like, I'm suffering anyway. What if I suffer at this conference instead of suffering at home? So I should just go and suffer there. Maybe something is gonna be better than here. So I was doing so not well, like emotionally and even physically, that I was like speaking in tongues just to keep myself alive, like just to avoid breakdown. This is how bad I was doing at the time. And arrived at the conference, and John started to speak, and I was still mumbling my tongues, and he was annoying. Like, I didn't like him. Not his style, not the way he moved, and his jokes. Nothing was like my kind of thing about him. But I felt like I'm suffering, so I can't have preferences. And as I was sitting there mumbling my little tongues, I started to laugh. And it wasn't a thing there, like among the Hungarians, to laugh at this conference. Like, everyone was just listening, trying not to be shocked. That was all of it. And I felt like, yeah, I felt like laughing. Not because my mind grasped it. Yeah, it was almost involuntary. Like, I started to laugh, and I laughed through the whole session. I was probably the most annoying person in the room. I wasn't too loud. I hope so. And the gospel was the least interesting part of the Christianity for me at that time. Like, I love the miracles. I love the way Jesus shows up in my room. I love the way I can experience the presence. I love all the new things I discovered in this revival movement, or whatever you want to call it. But I really didn't want anything with that gospel. It means that I'm simple. Yeah, I've heard it enough. So I just didn't like it. And I felt like I've never heard the gospel this way when John was speaking. Like, this is actually a happy thing. This is actually sounds good. Like, this makes me feel better just to hear it. And at that time, I had like two gods in my head simultaneously. I grew up in a religious home and I've attended hundreds of terrible meetings. And all the Bible verses were ringing with those dry sermons, so I couldn't even read the Bible because everything reminded me of something empty and dead. So I never read the Bible at that time. And I had a God constructed from those old sermons and Bible verses, and he was quite mean and demanding, and I could never measure up to him, but in theory he was good. And there was the other God that I really loved and enjoyed, the God that would show up in my room every day. And this was the time when I started to experience crazy things in the presence of God. I really loved my visions, seeing heaven, all of these. And I felt like that God that I encountered is a nice person. Maybe he's only nice because I'm just recovering from depression and anxiety and he knows how to get me healed, or but somehow I experience a nice God. He's just as nice as the God in the book Shack. Like, but I felt like, yeah, it is a fiction book, so God is surely not like that. But it was like, yeah, I have these two gods, and I never could cross this gap between them. I try to honor the old one because people say he's like that, but I could only live with the new one who was kind of nice and fun. And as John was speaking, I just realized that the God I experiencing is the God. And there is no other version I need to honor in my head. Like, the other God is rather Satan, and I don't have to believe in him anymore. I didn't process it mentally the way I'm talking right now, but this is what was happening to me. Yeah. And all the revelations I got in my visions and experiences that were too good to be true, and I put them on the shelf because they might be deceptions. They are too good, but I can't throw them away. They might find their place one day. All of those revelations just clicked that, oh, they were all true. Like, you are one with me, and no need to strive another thing, and you don't have to climb into my presence. Everything is endlessly available to you of my kingdom. All of these things that Jesus was telling me every time we had an encounter. At that time, this was all about encounters. But this was the way God just introduced himself to me in this season, and it was, yeah. At that conference, I had this moment when I was like, yeah, the God I'm experiencing in my room is the real God, and the things he's saying that sound too weird, too good, are actually true, and I can actually fully believe them, not just put them on the shelf, but oh, I'm really one with him. He's really limitlessly available to me. Because at this time I really knew the value of experiencing the presence, but I was striving so hard. Yeah, I could get depressed about and anxious about like trying to experience God. So yeah. And what I also experienced is that, yeah, it makes my mental health better to believe these things. Like, it's just, most of the anxiety I had in my life were like related to Christian beliefs. And as they are getting away from my head, actually I feel better. um so I went home that night and I felt like the breakdown I was so successfully preventing is actually happening. But it wasn't just like the breakdown of like my current emotional state, but the breakdown of everything I've ever believed about anything. Like, it was like, I don't even have the same God, I'm not even the same person, the world is not even the same world. Like, if that is true, and it feels like it is true, even though the guy is a little bit annoying, I just sometimes I don't like harsh people, and he felt like harsh. Now I like him, but at the time it was like, oh, yeah, you're too much. Yeah, so I felt like it is something about this teaching is true. I don't know which part and how it is true, but there is something about it. There is something about like, you know, when you don't agree with someone and you still feel that it is true. This is how I felt. And you don't know how you will process this thing that you can't believe what you want to believe and what you have to believe, but you have to give it up because there's something higher than that. Yeah. So I went home and I called a friend of mine who was talking about that kind of good God, but I always felt like he was edgy. So I told him like, there is an American man here and he's talking things that are similar to your things, so you might come over tomorrow because we have another day of the conference. And he came and he really enjoyed it, and we ended up on the floor after communion, like shaking and all of that. At this time I was really into that kind of thing. I still am. But I was like, this was the main point, like when I got like on the floor in the places. So yeah, it was awesome. I still couldn't grasp it with my mind what was going on, but yeah, for the first time I felt like gospel makes sense. Even the Bible talks about a good God. I don't have to honor this idol God in my head constructed by false beliefs. I can actually believe everything God told me when we were conversing. So yeah, I had another breakdown of the most positive kind, that I was asking God to like, you know, give me a little tool to fix my machine, and God said like, we're gonna throw away the machine and we're gonna burn down the house where the machine was, and we actually moved to another galaxy. No, so this was the difference. And it was scary, very scary, because nothing was certain anymore. Like, I allowed to question everything, and it was like, then I had no safe points in my head anymore. Like, maybe Jesus is still the Son of God. That's the kind of like a fixed point, but everything else is just flying away. So I was at home and I was having my harsher breakdown than previously. Because now not just my mental world was collapsing, but my everything was collapsing. And it was great. Like I felt like it has to happen. And there's no way back for me. Like I can't pretend that I don't know what I know. I can't unlearn what I learned. I can pretend that I didn't know these things like in front of other people, but I can't pretend it for myself. And there's no other option but to go down this road. Like some part of my world has flipped, and the only thing I can do is let the whole thing flip. So I started to listen to Jesus trips, almost all of them. So it's hard to find one that I've never seen. And to be honest, it was a slow process. Like the first shift was like very harsh and intense, but it took me years to like have this message of grace so much implanted in me that I felt like I can express it. Like I felt like, oh, I'm so confused, I don't want to share it with others. So it was like maybe in 2019 when I had my first video on grace, and it was like I felt like I'm sharing something of my heart, but people were so offended in Hungarian. I make my videos in English as a joke. I know no one would listen to a girl with like a funny accent. I make it in Hungarian, and I'm also an interpreter, and this is the way how I keep my level of English. That I make videos in English. So it's a fun thing for me. But in the Hungarian version of this video made a huge like impact in not the most positive way. Like people were so angry with me. I've never seen people reacting that intensely towards my videos. Like I had videos about visiting heaven, I had videos about crazy manifestations. I thought I was edgy already. There's nothing more edgy than grace. Like so important people called me the next day. What was I doing and what am I believing and what's going on? And I was like, oh, I could have made a makeup video. It's my channel. Like, why are you offended? Yeah. So this message is like, yeah, it's not always a peaceful one. And now I'm taking the risk of like being part of the organizing of this conference. And I know that not all of the people will be like very happy about it. And what I tell you is that you don't have to agree with everything John is saying. You don't have to agree with anyone perfectly. To be honest, I don't really agree with myself most of the time. Like I watched a previous video and I'm like, oh yeah, it's misunderstandable and not 100% true. So it's like, when I don't invite you to like come and be brainwashed. I invite you to have a broader view. Even if you come to the conclusion that you can't agree with someone with John in a particular issue, it's still good for you to like have your own conversation with God about a certain issue and come to your own revelation about it, than just like, oh, I shouldn't question anything, I'm gonna step back. So To be honest, I agree with John in most of the issues that he's speaking about, but you don't have to. You can still enjoy this conference, you can still join us, you can still um, mm, let God give you things he wants to give you through this conference. Um, and it might be very different from what others will be receiving. Yeah, so you are very welcome. All the application details, registration, everything will be in the description below. Feel free to invite people. It's gonna be a free event, but all kinds of support are very appreciated. Even practical help, like there's no church behind it, no community, so just random friends organizing it. So if you feel like helping in any way, feel free to contact me. I am one of the organizers. Yeah. So I think what John has received from God as a revelation about the finished work of Christ and grace and on the goodness of God is something that Hungary really needs, and Christians overall really need. And I'm so thankful that I get to be a part of this. A few years later, when I was like starting to enjoy this message, and I didn't just feel confused about like all my beliefs being shattered, but I started to like have a confidence in this much better view on God. I forgot my line. So yeah, as this was happening, I also done a school, a theology school that John holds. Like a lot of other teachers are there, but John is one of them, and I felt like doing that course during COVID. That was I was doing. All the country was shut down. I couldn't even go out on the streets, and I was doing this school and listening to the lectures. It was awesome. It was the best time of my life. Like everyone was like, "Oh, the end of the world," and I'm like, I'm feeling really good. So after almost every session, I felt like the world is better, I am better, God is better, everything is so much better. So yeah, mental health wise, it was good. Like there are so many spiritual benefits of understanding grace and understanding the gospel and having a good view on God. You can experience God more easily. You can trust God more easily. You can experience crazy supernatural things without effort. So there are a lot of spiritual aspects to your life that can be improved by understanding the gospel. But my mental health has improved like crazy. Like yeah, my anxiety was like very much related to Christian things and expectations, and yeah, I can't say it is completely healed. It is completely healed, but I can still have like bad thoughts or negative feelings and I can get overwhelmed, sometimes for more hours, sometimes even for more days. But yeah, I've never enjoyed life as much as I do now. That's what I can tell. And of course, it wasn't just John who influenced me in that journey, but he is definitely one of the main figures that who impacted me with his teachings. So I'm so thankful that I could share this with you, and I hope we can meet in Budapest in October. God bless you. You are so loved. Bye.